6.5%, was it? Is that what the current odds are of the Stanley Cup?
Well, and if you look at the round-by-round progression, the Stanley Cup favorite is the Vancouver Canucks.
Like, what a time to be alive!
Talking you through every goalie controversy, scoring slump, and draft lottery bust, this is the C4 Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com. Here they are, the best starting lineup we could afford under the salary cap. Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
C4 Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com and brought to you by the Full Press Network. Matt Lee with you here, along with my talented, wonderful, everyone's favorite co-host from the United Kingdom. It's Anna Forsyth herself. Anna, you can follow at aforsyth03 on Twitter. And Anna, how are you doing this lovely Monday evening?
Well, the better for hearing that introduction. It just gets better and better every time. Pumping up my tires.
Yeah, you know, we're going to make it a thing throughout the rest of the postseason, which I hope is a long postseason. But I wanted to ask you how you're doing after what was a wild weekend.
Yeah, for those of you listening in and not able to see us, Matt just threw me a very corny wink. Yeah, it was great. I was more pleased to get it done on Friday. It was a great start to my weekend. Finally got sunny after Friday too, so I thought that was probably a good omen now that Canucks are through. Yeah, it was really fun. I was even, overtime was exciting, but I was glad it was over quickly.
All 11 seconds of it.
Yeah, that was the perfect amount of time for me.
Yeah. We'll talk about the entirety of the Minnesota Wild series, and boy, what a difference a week makes, because at this time last Monday, Anna, you and Chris, I was not on this episode last week, but you guys were talking about what a poor Game 1 performance the Vancouver Canucks had. So it was great to see that the Canucks did manage to show up for Games 2, 3, and 4, stringing together those three inspired performances, I would characterize them as, to claim their first playoff berth in 5 years. So we will dissect the entire Minnesota Wild playing series, our top performers of those 4 games as well. Also, we've got to tee up the upcoming Round 1 series against the defending, reigning Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues. Can the Canucks pull off a major upset against the champs? We will do a deep dive into what needs to happen for the Canucks to make it past the first round, plus our series predictions, of course. And, of course, Anna, today, Monday afternoon, was the NHL Draft Lottery, or at least Phase 2 of it. And the New York Rangers are the lucky winners of the Alexis Lafreniere sweepstakes. Cannot believe it. I think we're both glad it's not the Edmonton Oilers, but we will get into all that as well.
Yeah, but I think we can believe it, Matt. We can believe it. One of the biggest markets in the league.
I mean, we'll save it for the actual discussion, but I will say the New York Rangers were not the worst choice that could have won the Lafreniere sweepstakes, but we will get into that as well. All that coming up next on what is a very jam-packed, full episode here of the C4 Podcast, again, brought to you by the Full Press Network, all coming up right now. So, Anna, it was the Canucks versus Minnesota, Game 4. The Vancouver Canucks we had seen just the day before in Game 3, that rare afternoon matinee game. First of all, did you even watch Game 3 in the entirety? I know it was a weird one falling on the workday, 11:30 local time. Did you watch it? It's okay. Your employers probably are not listening.
Yeah, if my employers are listening, no, definitely not. Was super concentrating on work. But yeah. Yeah, I watched it. That's one of the perks from working from home. I was obviously working too, but I did have it on in the background. I did have the cricket was on until 11, and then I had a short break, and then just threw on the hockey. So it was a wild day. Very exciting.
I feel like it was a blown opportunity for the Canucks social media channels to try and write a letter for people to excuse their employees' absence from 11:30 to 2:30. That was a bit of a blow. Let's be honest. We're working from home, middle of a pandemic. It was basically entrapment. Of course we're going to watch. What person is not going to watch that's working from home?
Totally. I mean, not to get off the rails straight away, but it's not been a great week for the Canucks social media channels, week or so. So, yeah, no surprises there that they missed that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, we're not here to talk about Game 3. Let's go back to Game 4, Anna. And I think the best thing that we can do is sort of lead it off with your reaction in the moment when you saw Chris Tanev score that goal 11 seconds into that overtime. What was your feelings? What was going through your mind?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I saw it go into the back of the net. I didn't even see the shot. I was just like, okay, yeah, I was at a bar with, I was about to say friend of the show, Nadine, but she doesn't listen to podcasts, so screw her. She's just a friend of mine. But, yeah, and we were just like sort of chatting away as the game started back up again, like putting our phones away to get glued to the game, and the puck was already in the net. Like, I just wasn't expecting it to happen that fast. I wasn't expecting it to be Chris Tanev necessarily, but yeah.
I was thinking going into that overtime, wouldn't it have just been the most ironic moment in franchise history if after 4 years of having him in our lineup, that Louis Eriksson would have been the one to score the overtime goal that sends the Vancouver Canucks to the playoffs?
It would be the most Vancouver moment, but you know what? He's a defensive king. He's just like playing that shutdown role to a T. He's not there for the glory moments,
But if it wasn't going to be Louis Eriksson, of course it had to be Chris Tanev, who had 2 regular season goals the entire year and has known to score a clutch overtime goal every now and then in his day as well. But I remember seeing the shot from the point. It bounced. The puck kind of bounced off of Nico Sturm's stick right to Tanev, which allowed the shot in the first place. And I remember seeing that goal, and I thought to myself, and you can agree or disagree with this, Anna, that was the biggest goal since 2011. Anytime in 2011, like you can pick your moment at 2011, but that was one of the biggest goals in about a decade in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it came in such strange circumstances that even when people were saying, throwing out those photos on social media, me the last time the Canucks won a playoffs or postseason series, and me now, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's weird, because just this whole time I've been casting my mind back to Calgary and the last time we were in the playoffs, but that sucked. It wasn't a fun time. Canucks did win a game, but it wasn't fun, and then they've been swept as well in the subsequent to 2011 series. So I think it really is a huge moment. It's such strange circumstances, but the fact that it was one of the 2 players remaining from the 2011 team was quite significant, and you could see how much it meant to him.
Yeah, I mean, you remember seeing the post-game interview, and I mean, the joke aside about how he could think of some things that they could do to celebrate by getting undressed. I mean, I don't even know what was happening there with Chris Tanev. Like,
Adrenaline.
Yeah, maybe, but I remember thinking, like, did he just say what I think he said? But anyway, I digress. No doubt in my mind, it was one of the biggest goals at least over the last 5 or 6 years for me. Maybe up there with Daniel's overtime winner against the Coyotes in their home series finale.
Right.
That was up there. But I mean, in terms of like sheer importance to the franchise, this goal certainly meant a lot to this club. And I think, we saw this a little bit on Twitter as well, Anna, is that I feel that goal really signified it was the official end of the Vancouver Canucks rebuild from the last 5 years.
I mean, I don't know if like that goal specifically signifies it, but I do think it shows that that they've come quite far. I mean, I think we can all see that where the Canucks are when the regular season got paused is not really the team they are. Like, they had their number 1 goaltender who'd been stealing wins from them all season out. They'd had, a series of injuries, series of tough road trips. So I think they are definitely a little better from where they ended up. And there's still ways to go in terms of building a complete team, but we're definitely better than, we're not like this. We're definitely on the way up. We're definitely there.
I say
Make your case for the end of the rebuild, though.
Okay, so I believe that this marked the end of the rebuild because now that the Vancouver Canucks are officially in the NHL playoffs, I think that given the young talent that you have in place, the core players that you have in place, the NHL playoffs are no longer what we thought would be the hope. In my mind, this goal really signifies that NHL playoffs are the expectation for players. And for my mind, I look at how this team is going to expect to make the playoffs for the next 5 to 10 seasons. That signals to me that it's the end of a rebuild. Had the Canucks found a way to lose this series against the Minnesota Wild, I think most of us would say that they're not quite there yet, that they're still somewhat of a rebuilding team. They would have had, they would have been in the draft lottery this afternoon, for instance, and we would have been talking about who they're going to take with that 11, 12, 13th overall pick. But, now that they have scored this goal, they have booked their ticket to the NHL postseason, that is now the bar that they have to meet every single year as long as this core is in place. That's why I feel it really signified the end of the NHL rebuild for the Canucks.
Yeah, I definitely take your point there. I think there's still some things up in the air just as far as what happens with the goalie situation, what happens with Tyler Toffoli. I mean, we don't know how badly he's been injured, but I mean, he remains in the bubble, so that's one good thing. But yeah, I just think there's just a lot of uncertainties. And the thing is that although, yes, I expect them to make the playoffs from here on out, I think I would have expected that anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, we were a playoff team. It's just marginal. Like, I think that they were a bubble team that were just about good enough for the playoffs. And it's such a strange situation we're in now.
Yeah,
that
fair enough.
I think it's going to be a crazy playoffs. I think we might see a lot of upsets just from the way the tournament's been structured.
Yeah, and we'll get into the NHL playoffs themselves in the next segment here, Anna. But going back to the Vancouver Canucks versus Minnesota Wild series, you've had now a few days to sort of look back on that series and figure out who really stood out for you. If you were to name one single player that really delivered a great performance over the course of that 4-game series, which player really stands out for you?
Brock Besser.
Okay, and why would you say old vanilla, Mr. Vanilla Brock Besser?
Mr. Vanilla, you know what? I love vanilla. Vanilla's great. I would say, like, the temptation to say Pedersen because he just reliably performed in every single game. And, for example, Miller did not, but he did come good in the end. But I think the pressure that Besser was under, like the spotlight on him because it's his hometown team, all his friends watching and like waiting for him to trip up almost, coming out with the injury just before the pause. And yeah, just the amount of pressure that he was under and the scrutiny he was under, not playing on his preferred line, although like playing with Bo Horvat to start off with, and then just being reunited with that Lotto line and having loads of fun and just performing. So he's impressed me the most. I'm not saying he was the best player in the entire series. I think that's still Pedersen, and I think probably Quinn Hughes is underneath that, but Besser impressed me the most, definitely.
Yeah, to your point, and I wasn't going to say Besser myself, but I think further to what you've said, you could really tell that Besser wanted that series. You even look at Tanev's goal in overtime, and you see the reaction from Brock Besser. Like, you could tell that was a bit of a weight off his shoulders, seeing that the Canucks had officially put the Minnesota Wild away. I think Brock Besser really wanted that series, not to just prove it to his hometown, but I think also to sort of silence some of the doubters. You look back on it, Brock Besser kind of had he was looked at as kind of a whipping boy by Canucks fans in some regards. Fans like you and I, we had talked about how Besser's game had, regressed a little bit, that the pucks just weren't going in, that he was finding a difficult time, burying some of those chances. And while he wasn't scoring bar down like he had been in his rookie year, he was scoring a lot of dirty goals. And I think those are the kind of goals he's probably going to have to score the majority of the time in his career as well, because they're just not going to give him that much space. So I think for me, this was a real coming out party of sorts in terms of the fact that Brock Besser can play a more complete game, and he definitely impressed me. For me, I'll go back to the one that you had mentioned a little bit. It's Quinn Hughes for me, who really impressed me the most. All due respect to Elias Pettersson and Jacob Markstrom, who had some strong performances throughout the series. it was Quinn Hughes for me. And I think this was a guy who looked kind of like a deer in headlights in game one, along with the rest of the Canucks young players, but got better as the series went on and really started to take control of the series by game four. 3 points in game four. He had 3 points in game three, if I'm not mistaken. But that game four performance, he, spun off a defender again, which helped set up the Brandon Sutter goal. He scored a tying goal himself. I really thought Quinn Hughes really took control of that game on his own, really kind of put the team on his back a little bit, which gave them a good chance to come back from, 1-0, 3-1, and 4-3 deficits. 3 different deficits in that game, and it seemed like Quinn Hughes had a hand in erasing all those deficits. I'm just so intrigued to see what Quinn Hughes can do now in a full 7-game playoff series, and I'm kind of giddy excited to see it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that Quinn was really strong, and what really impressed me and gives me confidence going forward is how he dealt with mistakes, in that he did make some over the course of that series. I mean, I think every single player on the team did, but he did make some, and but he didn't change his game because of it. Yep. He got caught out walking the line one time, but he didn't let that phase him, and he just went again. And yeah, his hockey sense and his confidence on ice, especially when you see him off ice, and he's just this very shy, retiring, mumbling guy. Quite vanilla as well. Yeah,
must be something in the American
it's very
waters.
impressive. Yeah.
That's
it.
The other thing that we want to discuss before we get into the St. Louis series, Anna, and you can tell me if you want me to go first or if you want to go first, but what's one thing that you learned in that Minnesota series that you may not have been aware of going into it?
Well, you go first, since it's your question. You go first, and I'll be set.
I think this is a good time to really put out a Tyler Mott appreciation post, especially with respect to Game 3. I think a lot of us kind of underestimated the value that Tyler Mott brings to this team. But boy, if there was a 3-star performance in Game 3, I think Tyler Mott would be up there. 7 blocks. He really looked like he was quarterbacking that penalty kill in a sense, brought energy to every shift. And I feel like you saw that maybe this Canucks team is a little deeper at the forward position than most people gave them credit for. It's not just Tyler Mott. We're talking about Brandon Sutter suddenly looking like he was 2015 Brandon Sutter. You were finding guys that were bringing value to this team, even though they're playing bottom 6 roles. Like even Zach McEwen gets reinserted at some point in Game 3 and 4, and he looked not out of place at all. And I think maybe the Canucks are kind of a sneaky deep team than I think their opponents had been originally thinking.
Yeah, that's good. I realized that as soon as you started talking, I realized what mine was going to be, and it was basically going to be that. So I'll choose something else but I do believe that you're right. I think we both were guilty of just saying, oh, we have a good top 6, but then beyond that, there's not much there. But yeah, Brandon Sutter has played, pretty well. Like even Louis, he's been defensively solid, and really stuck and hung with Horvat and really upped his game a lot. I will say that one thing that I would say is discipline is key. I think Chris and I talked a lot about this, and we've seen the Canucks did get more disciplined as the series went on, but
with the exception of Tyler Myers. With
the exception of Tyler Myers, for sure. And I think we might do down Tyler Myers a lot, but he is a good defenseman. He's just been overpaid and overplayed over the course of the year. So I do think that he stays out of the box, for one. And I do think it's important that Canucks do the work on the special teams, because I think it's going to be so key, because I think Canucks are pretty well matched with St. Louis, and we'll get into that in the next section, but they both have strong power plays and penalty kills, but they really need to make sure that that's ticking.
How much did you how close were you to the breaking point with respect to Tyler Myers and the undisciplined penalties that you saw in the course of that series? it got very frustrating for me as a fan to see how often Tyler Myers was going to the box.
Yeah, it was very frustrating, and I'm sure there's an element to reputational base calls and the fact that he's very noticeable both when he makes defensive mistakes for the fans, but also, when he makes a minor misjudgment that the officials are going to pull that up. I'm sure that's an element, but the amount of penalties he's taken, it really does show recklessness. And the games were coming thick and fast. I mean, it wasn't a traditional back-to-back, but it was still pretty close Thursday, Friday there. So I just hope he gets his head straight and just not to panic when he's under pressure and make those really costly errors, because I don't want to see that against the Blues. I think that would be a big problem.
Fair enough. Maybe one last thing before we get to the break here, Anna. From what you saw from him in the 4 games, how much more does Jacob Markstrom have to go in his game to finally be back at MVP level? I think despite the fact that he had a shutout in Game 3, looked unstoppable in that game, he looked very stoppable in Game 4 when he surrendered maybe 2 or even 3 soft goals against the Minnesota Wild. I would characterize it as a uneven series performance from Jacob Markstrom. It was a bit of Jekyll and Hyde. I don't think the soft goals that we saw from Jacob Markstrom throughout the course of the Minnesota series, they hurt as much, but they will hurt more if he is still letting in soft goals against the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, the pucks weren't super stoppable for him, that's for sure. But, honestly, the season he's had and the way he's played in training camp, and honestly through most of the series, I think even Game 1, you might argue that 1 or 2 of the goals that in Game 1 he'd want back, but I think in general his game was pretty good. But yeah, Game 4 was rough for him, but I don't think that's the goaltender he is. I think Canucks owe him 1 or several games. They're a long way in debt, that defensive group, to Jacob Markstrom. So I think it may just be the amount of shots he faced in just a very busy week for him. So I'm not that concerned overall, but it's true that he's not, there's a couple of goalies in the league that are still ahead of him, and to make that jump, he will need to be consistent day in, day out, and under pressure of playoff hockey. But I really think he'll come into his own in this series.
Fair enough. We'll take a break, Anna, and when we come back, we're setting up the entire thing. Vancouver Canucks taking on the reigning, defending Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues. Back to preview that series right here on the C4 podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com and brought to you by the Full Press Network.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on it.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? And that because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He didn't play. He's going to get a lot of power play time. And, yeah, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
So, Anna, the last round-robin game happens on Sunday afternoon. You're watching the Dallas Stars taking on the St. Louis Blues. Winner goes on to meet the Calgary Flames, and the loser goes on to face the Vancouver Canucks. At the time, Anna, when you were watching that game, who were you sort of hoping the Vancouver Canucks would face between those two teams?
Oh, yeah, I wanted Dallas. I'm not going to lie. It's not like I dreaded getting the Blues, but I definitely would have preferred Dallas. I think it's quite hard to judge because the round robin was just so lackluster and lacking in intensity compared to the play-in series, obviously, because the jeopardy was so much higher. But overall, I think St. Louis are a better team, and Canucks have struggled against them a little bit. But they've had really good games against them too. So, yeah, I definitely would have preferred Dallas, but not having nightmares about St. Louis. Not quite there.
I think for me, I'm sort of in the same boat. Preferred Dallas, but clearly liked St. Louis more than either of the Vegas Golden Knights or the Colorado Avalanche, who were absolute worst case scenarios for me at
Yeah.
that point. So I think to a degree, yes, you're concerned about the St. Louis Blues, and you probably should be if they're the reigning defending Stanley Cup champions. But at the same time, Anna, it's a good time to discuss, are you really that afraid of the St. Louis Blues? Because if you watch that game on Sunday, and I caught the highlights and I saw some of the analysis, the St. Louis Blues looked pretty unmotivated to be playing hockey at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's a completely different energy, that round robin series, and I do expect every single team to step up their game. You know, they don't want to get injured playing for playoffs that they're already qualified for. But I do think it will do them some damage that they won't have been playing these high intensity games. I will say that, like, they are the reigning Stanley Cup champs, but they were complete underdogs last year. Like, no one expected them to get there, did they? So, and they performed better this year in the regular season, but it's still not like the absolutely most terrifying teams for the Canucks to face. As you say, like Vegas, I would be terrified for the Canucks to play Vegas. Colorado, too, not ideal. And if Canucks do make it past St. Louis, fingers crossed, whatever, the next round just will be absolutely terrifying, but we're not there yet, so let's not count on our chickens.
Right, but I think, like, I watched a few of the round robin games, and then I obviously watched a lot of the play-in series as well. There were some of the teams that were competing in the round robin portion that looked like they were taking this whole thing very seriously. The Vegas Golden Knights, Colorado Avalanche really stood out to me as two of those Western teams that really looked motivated. But the Dallas Stars and St. Louis Blues looked very unmotivated to play, like they just wanted to get the heck out of Edmonton. Even in the Eastern Conference, Philadelphia looked like one of the better teams, but for some reason, the Boston Bruins didn't exactly look like a motivated team as well. I don't know how and why I can explain why some teams looked really good and some teams didn't. But if we're looking at some early keys to the series here, Anna, if the Vancouver Canucks are walking into a 7-game series against the St. Louis Blues, and this is a Blues team that is kind of still sleeping and not, waking up to play some serious hockey, that game one of all games looks very must win. Like, if the Canucks have a shot against the St. Louis Blues, they're going to have to come out of the gates flying for game one and really take advantage of what is probably a not mentally focused Blues team.
I completely agree. I think game one is it's advantage Canucks, and they need to capitalize. They need to set the tone of the series and just say, look, we're already there. We're already at a playoffs intensity, and you're going to get left behind by us. So I think it's a real opportunity for the Canucks to come out strong. And as we saw in game one of the Minnesota series, the Canucks just made too many mistakes, and Minnesota were there to capitalize on them. And I see that Blues can easily be that team too. So, yeah, they all need to come out the gate strong for sure.
And, I mean, you look at this Blues team, and coincidentally, what could happen if they allow the Blues to take game one? Well, then all of a sudden you're giving the defending champions some life, saying like, oh, yeah, we remember that we're a very good team and we are the defending Stanley Cup champions. The last thing you want to do is give them some life, some hope after a game one performance. So, again, like, every game of a 7-game series is a must win, but boy, that game one series is going to have some extra importance to me if you're the Canucks looking to get some sort of a psychological advantage in that series. So, I'm watching that game one series, and it's kind of one of those things where if you see whoever wins game one is probably going to win the series in my mind from that kind of vantage point. Otherwise, Anna, like, for you, what are some of the other key things that you're going to be looking at? I mean, let's talk about the goaltending a little bit. We talked about how Jacob Markstrom looked against the Minnesota Wild, but how important will Jacob Markstrom be going into that 7-game series against the Blues?
Yeah, I think it'll be really important because he kind of sets the tone and, like, that gives that serenity to the back line when, they're panicking or whatever. Jacob Markstrom can make the save and give them time to reset. So I think it's absolutely key, and I don't have any worries about that. I don't see, unless an injury happens, touch wood, I don't see Thatcher Demko getting in. I think that Jacob Markstrom is just going to step up and make this series his own.
Yeah, I think the goaltending battle is going to be the biggest thing to watch. Again, Jordan Binnington versus Jacob Markstrom. Worth noting that in the 2 games Jordan Binnington played in the round robin, Anna, he surrendered 8 goals. This is not exactly a guy who looked like someone who was a Calder runner-up to Elias Pettersson. I think that's going to be one of the focal points of the series is that goaltending matchup.
Yeah. And, don't get me wrong, Jordan Binnington is a strong goaltender, but as you say, he's not had, that great setup. And, as much as I don't think Demko gets in, he does provide a really strong backup, and I don't think the Blues have anything beyond Binnington. So if it comes a time where they have to pull him in a game, I see them really struggling. And there's also the fact that I don't know how much we buy into the psychology of it, but, Binnington really seems to have, Pettersson and the Canucks seem to have really got in his head over the past matchups. And if you watched PD's presser yesterday, I believe it was, when he was asked about Binnington, it's clear that he's just really not that bothered about him at all. He was very polite about him.
But then conversely, Binnington was the guy who said that he deserved the Calder over Pettersson at this time last year, essentially.
Yeah, still working on how to
still
pronounce
rattled,
that.
Huh? Calder, Calder,
word,
whatever we're
Calder.
calling it.
Call it the Calder.
The other thing that I'm kind of interested in here, Anna, and I'm not sure how much you followed the Blues this year, is that Vladimir Tarasenko, who was obviously a very key piece for the Blues during their playoff run last season, recovering from shoulder surgery over the course of the season. He had missed about 6 months of action coming into the series, recently activated off the IR to be made available for this postseason. Wouldn't have been available had this been a normal 2019-2020 NHL playoffs. But here he is, 2 games in, pointless through those 2 round-robin games. I'm kind of curious to see which version of Vladimir Tarasenko the Canucks will be facing. Is it going to be the guy who's been off the ice for the last 6 months, or is it going to be the guy who was warranting some serious Conn Smythe consideration for the Blues last season?
I mean, it's so hard to say because shoulder injuries are huge. And, just recovering from them is massive. But, this time off has benefited a lot of people. For Canucks, Jacob Markstrom was able to heal up. Quite a few people had, little knocks. But the thing is, I do think Tarasenko is still a strong player, but I don't think he's league dominant anymore. He completely showed up for the Blues in the playoffs. But that was just a magic time for the Blues. It's so hard to really get a read on any of their players from that time because it was just this magic journey they were on or something, powered by the tunes of Gloria, right through to lifting the cup into Boston. So, we were very happy for them at the time. But I do think shoulder surgery could be, it's just such a big thing. And I obviously wish him all the best, but really hope he's not done healing yet.
The other small storyline from the Blues that I'm sort of looking at, Anna, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree here. Alex Pietrangelo is the captain of the St. Louis Blues, and he's an unrestricted free agent after this year. And part of me wonders, Pietrangelo, by the way, pointless in the 3 round robin games. Part of me wonders if Alex Pietrangelo is just not as mentally in this playoff as he should be. And if you're Alex Pietrangelo, how much are you thinking to yourself, I'm not going to put my body on the line. I've already got my Stanley Cup ring. I'm good. I'm just going to play. And if it happens, great. And if not, I'm an unrestricted free agent. I'm going to sign a huge deal with whoever wants to offer me the most money at the end of this season. Am I on to something, or do you think that, maybe there's not too much there?
Yeah, I'm not sure I do agree with you on that because I think time and time again we've seen players just throw their body on the line, especially through the playoffs, and necessarily they don't really have self-preservation in mind. You know, sometimes they do really, really stupid things in order to push their body and try and push their team to win. I think Pietrangelo is a great leader, great player. I don't think that's too much in his mind. Obviously, we all have had time to reflect on our own mortality over the last 4 months. And, you know, leaving your family after that intense time with them would be hard. But I do think, as much as I think that the teams from the play-in series have advantages from playing that high-intensity hockey, I do think we're going to see, once Game 1 happens, they will be shaken up quite a bit. It may not be enough, and I think they're definitely on the back foot. But I think as soon as the playoffs start, it's going to be a different beast.
Fair enough. I mean, in my mind, Alex Pietrangelo could get 0 points through 20 games of this postseason, and he would still get paid a ton of money. You know, the credentials that he has to his name speak for themselves. And this isn't a thing on just Alex Pietrangelo, really. This could be applied to all the Blues in particular. Everyone who was part of that Stanley Cup championship team from last season. They got their ring. They're good. Let's just play our guts out, and if we don't win, we get to leave Edmonton.
Yeah, I know. Leaving Edmonton is always
that's an alluring prospect that I don't think a lot of people have talked about here. I just think that the Blues have less to play for than the Vancouver Canucks do. The Canucks are young. They're naive. They've never won a Stanley Cup. Well, most of them haven't. They're getting up for this and taking it very seriously, which might explain why the St. Louis Blues, the Boston Bruins, you know, those players are not, because again, those teams and those players have won Stanley Cups recently. So,
but then we never get back-to-back Stanley Cup champions if everyone was just satisfied with a cup. Like, it happens. Like, you see teams go like so hard. I just don't buy that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think no matter your age, you'll still be going hard.
I mean, I'm going to call it right now. I think the Canucks are going to upset the St. Louis Blues, and I think the Carolina Hurricanes are going to upset the Boston Bruins. There's going to be a lot of play-in series, I think, that will see some crazy upsets because, like you and I have already discussed, these guys have been playing in do-or-die series. They've been in do-or-die mode for the last couple weeks, while these other teams that have had their round-robin games, they're all just sort of getting into form, trying to stay healthy. Competing for seeding, sure, it's part of the incentive to play hard, but they're not quite mentally there. And I think that's going to be the difference, at least in the early going of some series, and it's why I think the Vancouver Canucks are going to upset the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, I mean, I made my playoff predictions in my playoff pool, and I did the bracket challenge today. I picked the Canes to beat the Bruins. I picked Canucks to beat the Blues. I do think it does make a difference. That they've just been in these do or die situations, as you say.
Yeah,
but
fair enough.
I think they'll be intense. It's not. I don't think Canes or the Canucks are gonna.
It's not a cake.
Either of their series.
No, absolutely not. I think the Canucks are going to have an opportunity to give the Blues the jump in the early going. But if you spot a team a 1-0 series lead right out of the gates, then you're already putting yourself behind a huge 8-ball. So I think that could make the difference in some of these play-in series.
Yeah.
From the Canucks standpoint, Anna, I'll ask you some quick questions. You just tell me if it's a yes or no for you. Tyler Toffoli, still don't know about his status. Do you think we see him at some point in the St. Louis Blues series?
I mean, so hard to say because walking boot can mean so many things, but sure, I'll say yes, he gets in later in the series.
Will we see Adam Gaudette?
I mean, we still don't know what's happening there, so because NHL injury protocol. So I don't know. I would say no because I just have no idea what's happening.
Fair enough. Okay, maybe the better question to ask was, does Travis Green deviate from the team that he iced for Game 4 against the Minnesota Wild at any point going into Game 1? Does he change his lineup?
I wouldn't say going into game one, but I think the power of Travis Green in that series was him being adaptable. He lost Tyler Toffoli. He lost Michael Furland. We saw some really weak play from that third line, for example, in the first game. And then he reunited the Lotto line, which that was my one thing I asked for going into it, and it worked. So I don't necessarily see him making changes, but I think he's perfectly willing to change it as soon as it doesn't work.
Has Jake Virtanen earned the right to stay in the lineup at this point?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think he played okay. But I think his spot is still very fragile.
Tenuous. Yep, fair enough. This one might be a little bit more of intriguing one for you. We saw this a late game insertion, Olli Juolevi taking the place for Oscar Fantenberg. 6 minutes and change. He didn't look great, but he didn't look bad either. As true proponents of the Oscar Fantenberg please bench him and never use him again group, even though he had some good moments in the Minnesota Wild series, are you intrigued by the idea of giving Olli Juolevi continued minutes?
I mean, I don't think playoffs are the time for intriguing options necessarily, like exploring stuff that I'm interested in seeing. But yeah, like he's a fine option if we don't like have anyone else to go there. Like I wasn't super concerned by it, so I think that's probably a good thing given his huge injury history and really troubled pro career so far. The fact that he wasn't awful, it's pretty good. And I know that's sad, but we really don't have a lot of options on our back end, and all the Black Ace options are just far more mysterious. So.
Right. So let me ask you this. If it comes to Fantenberg being unfit to play going into game one, and you have both of them at your disposal, are you using Jordy Ben or are you using Olli Juolevi?
See, I think, yeah, obviously we don't know what the like quarantining rules look like, but if they're both available, I don't think there's that much difference, but I'd probably pick Jordy Ben, and I'd say Travis would too.
Yeah, fair enough. I think if you use either player, they're probably seeing the exact same number of minutes that Juolevi got on Friday night against the Minnesota Wild, maybe a couple extra more.
Super sheltered.
Something under the lines of 8 to 9 minutes. But I mean, we're splitting hairs. And, you know, at the end of the day, those third pairing minutes do mean something because they're out there against the defending Stanley Cup champions. So I would prefer not to see them at all. I'd prefer to see Quinn Hughes for 25 minutes tonight. But there's that.
Well, I think you will. Like, he's going to ride Quinn Hughes, and he's shown that he's not afraid to do that. He's like, but that's one of the benefits of having a young team, is that you can ride those players. And until something bad happens, that's like almost asking for one of them to get injured playing heavy minutes. But yeah, I think that's a huge benefit, is that we don't, and if I'm not mistaken, we don't have any back-to-backs any longer, or at least...
There will be a back-to-back at some point in the series. I believe it's from game... I can't remember. It's in there somewhere. I'll look it up. In the meantime, Anna, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the NHL Draft Lottery. Yes, I have to change this here. I had earlier put in that the Oilers won the Draft Lottery. It was
you were just
reflex,
preempting.
Force of habit. So the New York Rangers instead have actually won the Draft Lottery. So we'll talk about that coming up next here on the C4 podcast, CanucksHockeyBlog.com, and the Full Press Network.
He liked to say the F word.
Oh, then get the here then. Okay, see ya.
Is going to have the F word on it.
I wish I could give you an explanation about it. I can't.
You, out of here.
You said the F word, Dad.
You called me the F word.
Anna, you look like you have an answer to our question about a back-to-back.
Yeah, it would be Sunday, Monday.
Is that games 3 and 4?
Yeah.
Got it. Advantage Vancouver, by the way.
Yeah, let's hope.
So earlier today, the NHL hosting the Phase 2 of the NHL draft lottery. I don't know if you saw this. We posted it on Discord, by the way, bit.ly.com/C4 podcast, if you want to join us in Discord. But did you see the slow motion replay of the actual poll? And you see just for like a half second before the New York Rangers ball goes in, that the Toronto Maple Leafs ball gets sucked into the tube, and it like sucks back out, and then in comes the Rangers one, and that's the one that gets pulled. It's like, as Corwin from Bar Down put it, the equivalent of hitting the post on an open net.
Yep.
It's the
barest of margins that make a difference, and I'm sure Leafs fans are loving that video.
We were that close, Hannah, like a fraction of a second away from seeing 3 to 4 months of Lafreniere / Toronto Maple Leaf stories on Sportsnet and TSN. And it would have been insufferable.
It really would have been. And as much as they have some exciting talent there, they also have, a very top-heavy lineup, and they just have some... Like, if Canucks have cap space problems like Toronto, yikes. So, I mean... I think what we want to say is it could have been worse.
Oh, it could have been much worse.
I think that Oilers would have been the worst option.
Yeah.
Followed by Toronto, and then I guess like
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Pittsburgh. Yeah, sure. And then
any of those
Rangers
three teams getting it would have been a nuclear option for me. But the Rangers are not preferable, but they're not the worst. For me, for you, did you have a preferred destination for Lafreniere?
As much as I don't wish a Winnipeg winter on anyone, I kind of like the Jets. I felt a bit sorry for them, especially as Scheifele's injury came against the Canucks, and that cost them huge. So yeah, I kind of would have liked to see him there. In isolation, wouldn't have minded Minnesota getting them, but obviously what that would have meant for the Canucks, I wouldn't want it. There's too many storylines there, and that would have made Canucks Twitter implode. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess Winnipeg wouldn't have been bad.
So
how about you?
I thought Winnipeg as well, and I've been thinking more and more about this. Like, you answer me this. Is Winnipeg Switzerland to Canucks fans? You know what I mean?
It kind of is, and it's weird to say that because they do beat us quite a lot.
Yeah,
so
but if you were to name like one Canadian team that you're kind of like, okay, like it's not a big deal if they win the Stanley Cup, if they get Alexis Lafreniere. Like, I never want to see Calgary and Edmonton win the Stanley Cup or get the first overall pick. I never want to see Toronto. I don't really care if Montreal got him or not, but obviously Montreal is in the playoffs right now, so we're not able to sort of explore that possibility. And we already know where Ottawa sort of stands. So, like, as far as it goes, like, I would have been the least angry if the Winnipeg Jets got it. And it's like, that's why I call Winnipeg the Switzerland of NHL teams for Canucks fans.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure there's another example of something that's just so hard to hate. I mean, you say that you
just felt bad for Winnipeg, by the way. Like, you mentioned the injuries, like Scheifele and
Laine. Oh, and Connor Hellebuyck is just so good.
Yeah.
You just, like, we wanted them to do a bit better than they did. I mean, especially as, like, we wanted them to beat Calgary, like, big time.
Right. So your thoughts on the New York Rangers getting first overall. In your mind, is it a slam dunk that is Alexis Lafreniere? Or do you think that they at least, according to friend of the show, Cam Robinson, at least explore the idea of either trading the pick or selecting Quinton Byfield?
Well, I think those two have been such standout prospects for such a long time that I think they've already made up their mind either way, that they've done their homework, and I'm sure they explored the option of Quinton Byfield, but I think they'll probably still pick Alexis Lafreniere, even though I understand Cam's points that Quinton Byfield seems like more of a sure thing in a way. But like Lafreniere is crazy talented, and I think we will see him go first overall.
Fair enough. Did you watch the lottery this afternoon? The actual drawing itself?
No, I was following it on Twitter whilst at work, so I was concentrating a little bit harder than last week.
Man, I'm Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, like, there was a couple people, because the Champions League is going on right now, or Europa League, sorry, and they were posting about that, and I was just like, get off my timeline. I need to focus on the lottery. That's all I want to see. I'm just refreshing every 2 seconds. But yeah, I didn't watch it. What was your opinion of it?
Oh man, like first of all, they need to make this happen live every season. Like I don't know if they need to have all the ping pong balls with all the combinations like they do in normal draft lottery years, but the sheer intrigue of watching the ping pong balls with the team logos on all of them was great fun for me in my mind. So I would fully endorse the idea of like having 100 ping pong balls, and you can divide up the odds accordingly with giving like one team, 6 balls or what have you. I just thought it was great intrigue for me, and I was like watching, and I see like all the logos flying in the little device and stuff like that. Even seeing now the replay of Toronto getting that close to having it, it was great fun for me.
Maybe I've watched too many versions of the actual lottery, the national lottery as a kid, where you just watch that happen every Saturday. That maybe that's just, it's lost its intrigue for me watching balls fly around a machine. I was just like, yep, okay.
I don't know. I just found myself very invested in something that had nothing to do with me as a Vancouver Canucks fan, and I was like nervous watching it. I don't know if it was maybe the sheer paranoia.
It was just such a good storyline, though.
Yeah, I guess so. It was gripping TV for my mind, and I hope that the NHL somehow makes it a permanent thing next season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they would love for stuff like that to happen, where you have that carryover of who's going to make it and who's going to be the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
They couldn't have drawn out better.
Anna, as we wrap things up here on the C4 podcast, the Vancouver Canucks will kick off their series against the St. Louis Blues, game 1 happening on Wednesday night. Let's hope that we hear a lot of I'm Still Standing by Elton John in this 7-game series. Your thoughts on this?
What, on Elton John?
Oh, yes. On the series itself, maybe some final words before,
sorry,
you've been doing this for years and stuff. I don't know. You had any final? Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But
but yes, I think it's going to be a tough series. I think Canucks will come strong out the gate, but St. Louis will fight back. Are we picking like a number of games?
Yeah, let's go with your prediction.
I think I put 7 in my bracket, but I want to change it to 6.
Oh,
6.
You want to change it to the Canucks in 6 now?
Yeah. Are you allowed to change your bracket on NHL.com?
Yeah,
I have to look that
I've already
up.
changed it a few times today.
Okay, my bracket is literally called Anything Could Happen, so I'm really not sure. But okay, what's your prediction?
I will also actually predict Canucks in 6. I'm not biased just because you said that now, but I had been thinking Canucks in 6, just because I think the Canucks, like we mentioned, do get the jump on the Blues in game 1, or at least I'm hoping, knock on wood, that they will. But it's going to be tough for sure. It depends on which version of the Blues show up. And if Jordan Binnington looks anything like he did in those 2 round robin games, it could be an even shorter series, to be perfectly honest with you. I've also been playing around on the bracket tool, by the way. What needs to happen for the Vancouver Canucks to avoid both Vegas and Colorado in round 2? If we're keeping score, essentially what needs to happen is both one of Vegas and Colorado need to essentially lose their series. It doesn't matter which one of them, just one of them needs to be upset in their series for the Vancouver Canucks to avoid the other. I don't like their chances, by the way.
I might change my bracket again, honestly, but at the moment I have like Vegas making it to the final. So
okay, so let's talk about this before we wrap things up. Then let's talk about who you have in your bracket. So let's go to the Vegas and the Chicago series. What do you have in your bracket?
Okay, I'm actually trying to find my bracket right now, but I have Vegas winning in 4. So
okay,
yeah.
I got Vegas in 6. And in the Colorado-Arizona series, I have Colorado winning in 5. What do you got for that one?
I either put 5 or 6, but yeah, Colorado for sure.
And I know you're still furiously trying to look up your bracket, so I will continue and talk that I have the Calgary Flames beating the Dallas Stars in 6 games in my bracket.
Yeah.
Yeah,
in 7.
You've got Calgary in 7?
Calgary in 7.
You're picking up what I'm
Local.
throwing down, huh? Let's go to the Eastern Conference. Philadelphia, Montreal. What do you got for that one?
I have Philly in 6.
I got Philly in 7. This series, I think, has the potential to be the biggest bracket buster. Tampa Bay and Columbus.
Yeah, I mean, I did pick Tampa in 5, but I didn't feel good about that pick. I didn't really know him.
Yeah, this is the first time where you and I sort of beg to differ here. I've got Columbus in 7 in the Revenge series. The Torch Revenge.
It's crazy because obviously Tampa, busted out of the first round after having one of the strongest seasons, maybe in the last, 5 years I've seen a regular season team having. And with this lackluster round robin series, maybe it could happen again.
Yeah.
But I'm just could it happen 2 years in a row? Are they going to fail 2 years in a row with that roster? I mean, maybe.
I'll say this. If the Tampa Bay Lightning lose again to the Columbus Blue Jackets, John Cooper will probably be fired as head coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I wouldn't be surprised if they move on from a big piece in their roster to shake things up a little bit.
Also, the goaltending is going to be huge there because whether Merzlikins makes it back or not, but I know they do have pretty much 1A, 1B goaltending in Columbus anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Let's continue to make this fast and furious here, Anna. Washington and the New York Islanders. What do you got in that series?
Washington in 5.
I got the Islanders in 6. Trotz's revenge.
I mean, yeah. Let's not revisit old stories, but what a strange time when he got fired.
And then I think for the Boston-Carolina series, you and I both had Carolina.
Yeah, I
got
said
Carolina
6.
in 6 as well. Interesting. So there are a few series that you and I beg to differ on, but for the West, I think we both have the exact same 4 teams winning their series, which would pit the Vancouver Canucks against the Colorado Avalanche in round 2 if you want to look that far ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I have no comment on what I think about that series.
I mean, I can read my bracket, but I'm not. I'm not going to.
No need to.
It's bad juju.
We'll
to
save
put it on air.
We'll save it for if and when we get there. How about that?
Yeah.
Well, Anna, that's going to wrap it up for us here on the C4 Podcast. A reminder that you can check us out on Twitter at the C4 Podcast. You can follow her at aforsyth03, one of the most active people on Twitter, one of the best follows for Canucks Twitter, if I do say so myself. You can also check us out on facebook.com/the C4Podcast, c4podcast.com. And I mentioned it earlier, check us out on Discord if you haven't already. The place to go if you want to just be a fan, engage with regular fans as well. Best place to go to bit.ly/C4 Discord. That's in all caps. Check us out. Join us. We will say hello, give you a shout out on the next podcast as well. Anna, as we wrap things up, any last words?
Let's just beat Jordan Bennington. Come on. I'm so excited to wipe the smile off his smug face.
Did you see the tweet that I put in from Jordan Bennington from a year or two ago?
I didn't, but he has not great Twitter records. So, along with him being smug, seems like a bad person. So I'm equally excited to beat him. What was the tweet you put
I
up?
post a lot of stuff in Discord, so I'm trying.
Yeah, some would argue too much. Your employers might argue too much, but
okay. So I want to be very careful about it here. But Jordan Bennington said at some point, maybe a year or two ago, that women on their periods should just be quiet.
yeah. Oh, I have seen that tweet. Yeah,
Okay,
he's
there
a
you
bad
go.
person.
Yeah, that's that. I was like, oh, dude.
Well, not to give you too much information, but I've just talked for an hour, Jordan, so shove it.
Well, with all that, we're out.